In this final video, we will complete the rest of the embossments in the project, and then we will finish it off with the pass sculpting for a couple of areas that needed, specifically the front of the barrel lug where it joins, a couple of spots around the rear of the barrel assembly. There is a line on the handle that needs a little bit of work. But in the meantime, I want to finish out with the rest of the embossments. There are a number of them. Almost half of these are indentions of the cylinder. I've made use of one feature in BobArt Pro, which is that I've got all these shut off such that I don't have to basically do quite as much jumping around to show them to you and then enable them. So I'm going to unsuppress this feature, and then I'm going to bring it open to edit it. This is the front sight. It's a straight line add emboss. I've got a line 0.13 high, 90 degrees, so it's a straight vertical line. I've got my geometry picked, and when we regenerate the model, you'll get to see what it looks like. And one thing I've noticed is that the videos don't really do a very good job of letting you see this. Anytime I move it, they pretty much mess up. So I'm going to blank and then unblank this model, and I'm not going to move for the next few embosses. Hopefully that'll give you a little bit clearer view. So there you see the front sight. Next we're going to do this lug at the bottom of the barrel. I'll unsuppress it, bring it up and edit. It is another straight line emboss, 0.13, 90 degrees. It is set to merge high because it crosses onto this other emboss, as you see. And because of that crossover, if I left it a straight add, it would jump up and give a different surface contour where it impinges on the barrel. So I set it to merge high. Got the color to it, and when we regenerate, you'll see that piece. Next we've got the latch here for the charging lever. It is another case, I'll unsuppress it, another case where it crosses over from where it sits on top of the cylinder here, crosses over to meet the lug. So again, I've got a merge high set as my type. This is another straight vertical line, 90 degrees slope, and 0.14 is the height on the line. Regenerating, and we'll see this one. Well, I made a slight difference in height between these two to give a little bit of definition to that. Moving back, and I'll blank this so you can see it better. Next we've got this flat part of the forging that comprises the charging handle. We'll unsuppress and show you that it is, once again, and this is the reason that I'm going through these very quickly. These are very simple embosses. If you've gotten this far in the tutorial, these are pretty much no-brainers, and so it's why I'm speeding up here, save a little time and to get these moved on out of the way. This one is 5/100 straight vertical line emboss, just an add because it does not cross over anything else. If this were set to view from straight above, you wouldn't see an impingement there. It doesn't actually cross onto this embossment. So we'll regenerate that. Now this piece is a cylinder with a rounded end. I didn't do a two-rail sweep as I've done a lot of the other cylinders because of that rounded end. I would have had to add that on, and I was able to get it all in one shot by using a standard emboss. First I'll unsuppress that, then bring it up. A standard emboss with a convex arc. That's basically a semicircle, 0 to 90 degrees angles, and at half of the distance between these two lines is 0.16. So the diameter would be 0.32. Bring that up with a merge high because it does impinge on the barrel lug here, and we can get that all in one shot. I believe I've gone over all the stuff there, so we'll let that be. Regenerate. And there you see it. Now we'll move back to what, there's really one more feature and then we'll get to the cylinder, and that is the pin that, let me bring this up to the top view. The barrel latching pin, and again I'll blank and unblank so that it shows up in the video. It's an artifact of the transcoding that's pretty annoying, but we'll try to get around it as best we can. A rectangular pin that goes through a hole in this rod that the cylinder spins on that secures the barrel to the frame assembly. There's a couple of locating pins down here at the bottom, and then the pin there, and that references everything and keeps it locked up tight. So first we've got, let's suppress that. We've got a little spring that's part of the pin. That's a retaining spring that once the pin is in keeps it from going anywhere. And on this one we're just doing an additive emboss, just a convex arc with 2/100ths of radius. It's just enough to give it a little definition is all. I'm not going very much relief on these pins. They just basically have to be there. That all looks good, so we'll go ahead and regenerate that one. And the next part is the actual pin. Unsuppress that and bring it up here. The exact same settings. It's a convex arc with 2/100ths of radius, straight up semicircle. Because these two, here's the little spring, because they share a line of geometry there, they actually stack one on top of the other, which works to the advantage because that brings the little spring out into some definition once we regenerate. There you go. Probably difficult to see, but the pin actually protrudes or the spring actually protrudes just a tad more than the pin. That works to our advantage. It looks pretty nice. Alright, next we have two features that are both indentions into the cylinder here. The first is the locking detents. Unsuppress those and bring up the edit window. These are vertical line drops. Basically they are 90-degree lines that drop in 5/100ths just straight down. They don't go in toward the axis of the cylinder, which that's too bad, but it's not really that big an issue in this case. I've got a darker blue selected to show them off, and so we'll go ahead and do these. They are features that at the very bottom here there's a spring-loaded pin that during the cocking action it pops up, engages one of these detents when it's dead center on the bottom, and it locks the cylinder with the chamber directly lined up with the barrel. Right behind that we have two indentions for the pockets that the percussion nipples ride in. Unsuppress that. Same sort of feature. They are straight vertical lines, negative, and one thing I didn't mention actually in the case of the locking detents is they are negative values. They're pushing down into the cylinder, so rather than a height they have a depth. Negative 1.2 in the case of these two. 90-degree vertical lines with the color associated with them there, so we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, the only things we've got left are the percussion nipples, the percussion caps, and the pins. Because I have to do the percussion nipples as two rail sweeps, I was not able to do multiple features. You saw earlier the feature for the detents got both of these, the feature for these pockets got both of them. On these guys I had to run just one at a time. So they are basically cylindrical or semi-cylindrical. The cross section is our old standby semicircle. We've got a rail, and then our cross section. And I'm going to go ahead and do both of these features at the same time because it's all really the same thing. You've got the base of the percussion nipple, then a little bit farther out you see these lines show up, and this is the actual percussion cap, which has a different color. But with both of those unsuppressed, we regenerate, and you see what I've got here. I'll turn this in a moment. You can see that it's actually a semicircle, but that's the next to last features. Let me unsuppress these other two. And I'm not even going to talk about them because it's the exact same thing, just that the geometry is down here. The last thing we've got is our round pins. We've got one here that attaches the ramrod to the charging lever, and we've got 3 that are in the frame. On these, I've just got a convex arc, straight additive emboss, 2/100ths of radius, and that's really all there is to it. That's just to give them enough definition to pop up off the frame and to be felt and seen, since they're different colors here. And we will go ahead and regenerate, and there is the entire emboss. Bring it up to a top view, and immediately pull it off of the top view. I'll drop off the emboss and then unblank it so that you get a good look at it. Alright, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a sculpting feature. I'm going to work on the little crease right here. I've got right back here, I've got a little high spot. There's also one right there at the edge. I want to try to fill in a little bit there, and I need to smooth out this handle. So I'm going to use probably 2 to 3 sculpting features. First thing I'm going to do is save the file, and then I'll spend some time on the sculpting features because it's one thing that we haven't gotten into at all yet, and it's a marvelously useful feature, but it's also fairly complex and not terribly intuitive. So we'll start off by deciding where we want the sculpting feature in the tree here. We want it to work on the things that we want it to work on and not to touch anything else. So in this case, I've got the barrel, the lug, the flat, and this indentation were all put together right up here. And then I've got down to the cutout, which is this part right here. I don't want this touched. I don't want either of these parts touched. So right between these two is where I want to put the sculpting feature. So we'll bring up a sculpting feature and just hit OK. It's right there. So now we drag it up to, yep, there we go. That's between the barrel depression and the barrel cutout. That's exactly where I want it. It'll work on everything before it, but it won't touch anything after it in the tree. And everything that's right around there that's the parts that I want to work on. So we're done with geometry. I'll turn that off. Now at this point, we go ahead and bring the sculpting feature back up by hitting edit. First thing you'll notice is that the resolution drops precipitously. Don't know why that is, but it is something that Bobcat does when you bring the sculpting feature up. Go over the various modes. Smooth is an averaging feature. You got a low spot right there and a high spot on either side. When you drag your brush across it with a smoothing, it tries to average those all together. So it'll lower the highs and raise the lows. You can consider it almost like a file or a grinder, except that it does kind of smush things around too. So it's got some properties of modeling clay or forging to it. Deposit basically lays down, and here's the brush, by the way. I'll go ahead and size it. It's set to 1/4 inch. We'll size it down to, say, 300s here. That's about the right size for this. Deposit will lay down a bit of material here, or basically it'll raise the level of the emboss wherever you ring it. And remove does the exact opposite. It'll dig a trench or put a dimple in where you single click it. And then it's got a view mode. Diameter is in inches, so the same size brush, if you zoom out, will lay down exactly the same size as when you zoom in. It'll always be 0.03 inches if that's what you've got it set to. Strength defaults to 0.05. I generally use that as a maximum and back off considerably down to as low as 0.01 to get a more subtle effect. What we're going to be doing here, if you've ever done any welding and filled a hole in with the welder and used a grinder to smooth it out, and then added a little more, then smooth it out again, that's exactly what we're doing here. So I go to deposit. I'm going to back off on my strength a little bit, and I'm going to go with a little bit bigger brush. Okay, this is a triangular depression. It's at its deepest right there, fares out to nothing there, fares its way up here. So most of my filling is going to be down low. So I'll lay a bead. I speak in welding terms a lot on this because it really is so much like filling in a hole with a welding stick. I'll lay a little bit more because I know that's a fairly deep hole. And kind of work in a triangular section here. Go one more layer. And one more up there. Okay. Next, I know that I've got a, I don't want to turn this because it'll make it look bad to you, the viewer, but right there is a high spot, so I'm going to go to remove. I've got my settings pretty well to suit the size of this, and I'm going to just proceed to knock that down a little bit. Okay, and I've also got a bit of a bulge here. This is where the barrel starts bulging out into that pear shape that we flattened. I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit off right here. One thing also to note is when you hold it in place and just do a single click to get a little dimple, that counts as an operation. So if I do one out here where I really didn't want one, I do undo and it goes away. That also counts. The single mouse click of dragging it across there counts as one operation. So that's how you want to work with those. Alright, I'm going to bring my size up to 0.08. I'm going to increase my strength because I'm going with a smoothing feature next. And I like to smooth at a fairly high level. There we go. Alright, so on this one, smoothing is an averaging feature, so it tends to average in the direction you're going to. I've got a flat, and then it falls off sharply, and I've got some odds and ends down here. So this is higher and this is lower than what's in here, hopefully. If I go up and down, I get a different operation than if I go side to side, because this is all roughly at the same elevation. Kind of like going along contour lines on a map. I'm going to start off going along the contours, and I'll work cross contour when I need to. One thing you've probably noticed by now is that I find that it's best to have a light touch when using the sculpting tools. It's easy to overpower them, and when you do, it is not necessarily very easy to dig your way back out of the hole you've dug. So I see that I need a little bit more here. I'm going to lower the brush size and the strength, and I'm going to fill in this little spot. And put a little out here. A little bit there. A little more there. I'm going to remove just a hair more right here. And then I'm going to go back to smoothing, increase my brush size, make it a little bit smaller than last time, but again, back up to full strength. you want to try to be careful when you get to the edges of material, because it'll bleed over onto your other emboss. That's one of the reasons that I was so careful to place this sculpting feature before all these embosses, but after these up here. If it bleeds over, then these embosses will just slap down and cover what it bled over, hopefully. That's the theory anyway. Okay. So you can see that I'm still running more or less along the contours and doing my best to just smooth things down as nicely as I can without affecting the areas that aren't really just immediately adjacent to this. I've still got a little bit of a pit right there. I'm going to leave my brush size the same, but slack the strength way off. And lay kind of a low flat bead right there. I'll make that 2 of them. Then go back up to smooth, increase my power. And basically smudge all that in there. If you like to use the analogy of clay and a thumb, that really is closer to what's going on than the welding analogy, but I've got a background in both, and I tend to just kind of mix metaphors and butcher the language all over the place. Okay, I think that's pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and tilt this. It'll make things look pretty bad for you guys, but it lets me see what's going on, then I'll try to bring it together. Right in that area there's a little high spot. Right down there there's a little high spot. I'm going to go back to a top view, and that brings up actually a good point. The sculpting tool only works top down. If it's the only time that your mouse pointer is in agreement with the round cursor there. If you tilt it off to the side, which I'll do that, notice how there is no more agreement between my mouse cursor and the pointer. The mouse cursor is way over here, the pointer is way over there, and you just can't get them together. And that can cause real issues, believe me. Found that out the hard way. So always, before you start clicking on anything in sculpting, go to your top view. First thing I'm going to do is tell that okay, and I'm going to try and give you folks a little bit better view by going back there. Now I'm going to edit my sculpting mode again. Of course that drops the resolution again. I'm going to drop the brush size back down to 0.3 and the strength to 0.3. Bring up my remove tool, and as I said, I've got a little bit of a high spot right there. I've got a little bit of a high spot, a little bit bigger high spot actually right there. So first, I'll just dig a little bit of material out there. I'm going to dig a little bit out right there. And then I'm going to bump my brush size back up and increase my strength. Go to a smoothing tool. Okay. Now, I might work on that a little bit more, but everything that I would do, you've just seen done, so I'm going to move back to a different area with a slightly different problem. It's going to be difficult for you to see. That's probably the best view of it. There's a little flange of basically high ground right there that I think might be a little bit too much for the overall smoothing pass that I'll put at the end. Might not flatten that enough, I think. I've also got a little bit of a valley to try to fill down here. It's not going to be easy to do, and I may have to leave that. So let me bring it back to a top view. I want to Bring up my remove tool, drop my brush size, and draw my strength. In the actual pistol, this is heavily radiused under here, so if I leave a big shadow of material that's been taken out, that's really okay. It'll look alright. So I think that's going to be pretty close. I'm going to increase the size again, increase the strength again, go to smooth, and just round that out as best I can. I don't want to get onto these contours here very much because I want to leave them as defined as possible. I don't really want to get off the reservation much at all there. Alright, let's see how that looks. Tilt it up. Alright, we've got a little spike there, a little spike down there. Those I think will get taken care of by the smoothing pass. But I'll try one more little hit on them. Alright, I'm on remove. And I'm going to just go to smooth with those settings. And do a little bit of work. Yep, that took care of it. Go back to top view. Alright, the last minor area I've got is this indent right here. I wanted a rounded edge on the barrel lug, but because I did that as a regular emboss, that also gave me a rounded edge here where they should join up. Clicking over to deposit, I'm going to decrease quite a bit on the brush size and try to get into the valley. It tends to try to drop the material on the nearest flat rather than if it's anywhere close to your cursor. So we'll see how well I can do this. Okay, that's better than I thought I'd be able to do. It's actually not very bad at all. Go back to top view so I don't get out of whack here. I'm going to drop my brush size even smaller. Make a smoothing pass or two, and then see if I can deposit just a little bit more into this hole. Alright, I think I'm probably close to as good as I'm going to get there. I'm going to jack my brush size back up a bit to say 3. Give myself some power and smooth this a little bit. Okay. Probably not going to be able to do a whole lot better than that. In a circumstance where that was a real issue, and it might be once I've got this on the machine getting ready to cut it, you could always go back in and just make a little small square feature that would fit in there and would fill that. And not really very difficult to do, not very conceptually challenging, so I'm not going to bother with it right now. I've got one more big smoothing thing to do, Gonna give myself a pretty good sized brush. And we'll go a little bit bigger actually. I'm gonna soften these lines just a little bit. Gonna have to be careful to stay off of the pins here, but bring this down. And I'm just going to move right along the contour. That's probably fine on the lower one, except this area in here could stand a little love. I'm just gonna kind of brush that out a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing along the top here, just one quick pass. I am going to fade it out a little bit up front here because it really did lose a lot of definition on the actual image. You could barely tell where the line went when it got to the forward part, the top line at least. And I'm going to step down just a little bit in size, and I'm going to do the same with this bottom chamfer. Going to just wipe all around. Maybe do it twice on this very bottom feature. And then a quick pass across there. Okay. I'm going to call that barrel substantially done. I'm just going to use the same sculpting pass because there's really only one other thing on the whole piece that I want to do, and that is blend this line in a little bit. So we'll bring the sculpting feature back up. I've got a 1/8 inch full power smooth, so I'm going to go across contour here to just kind of rub this line right out. And if you're wondering what those little rectangular artifacts on the screen are, so am I. I think they're a little borderline glitch it's just visual as far as I know. It doesn't indicate that anything's going to crash. They just pop up when they want to and then leave you high and dry. And that is one quick step away from being finished. I want to really increase the size of this and do it one more time. Okay. Now there's two last things to do. First of all, I'm going to blank the model and unblank it to give you a nice look on the video. I'm going to add a smoothing pass. This is an overall smoothing. It'll smooth the entire model. I'll do OK. And I'm going to go to Create Modify Stock. And I'm going to increase the resolution to 300. That's 300 triangles per inch. 200 is enough detail to let you do pretty fine work, but it doesn't take forever to regenerate. 300 brings it up to the point where it takes quite a bit of time to regenerate the model. So you really want to save that for your last. All I've added is one smoothing pass, so we'll hit regenerate. And with just a little luck, we'll have a very nice looking model that has only one or two small issues that hopefully I've pointed out all of them. And the major one being that there's a little bit of a gap right there where the frame meets the barrel lug. Add one little emboss and you can have that fixed. There are a few places where I took shortcuts, but overall, I'll bring this in and let you see some of the features and see what the smoothing pass did. Let me blank it and unblank it real quick. You remember that I had lots of little jaggies here and that this transition didn't look very great. It's much, much nicer now. Of course, I'll move it and blur it out for you. Overall, everything has been just refined a bit between the increase in resolution and the smoothing pass. But right there you have one high relief embossment of a Colt Model 1860 Army Revolver. And I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I know it's been a long one. In real time, this takes less time than when you're pointing out every detail of every embossment and talking and losing your place and going through the motions that I'm going through. I think I took about maybe 2.5 to 3 hours to do this the first time around. And it gets faster the more you work on something. I hope you've enjoyed this, and this concludes this tutorial. Thank you very much.